What are the origins of Easter? Do we find it within our Father's Word, or do we find it within pagan worship? Let's find out. Hey, this is Pastor Randy. Well, today I want to talk about the origins of Easter. I want to talk about whether or not we find this day within Scripture or whether we find this day within pagan worship. And I want to remove the suspense. We don't find this day within Scripture, we find it within pagan worship through antiquity. Matter of fact, it goes back thousands of years, really, but today we're going to focus on the word Easter and the origins of Easter itself. And I want to read three different sources. The first one is from the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. Very, very reputable source, by the way. This is not a fringe reference. This is very reputable and recognized by most Bible believers. And here's what it says about the origins of Easter. It says, the English word, and again, this is Easter, the word, comes from the Anglo-Saxon Esther or Estera, a Teutonic goddess to whom sacrifice was offered in April. So the name was transferred to the Paschal Feast. Now the word Paschal here refers to the Passover, not to the Easter. So we see here that Easter replaced Passover. Now we know historically and scripturally that the only day the apostles and the Messiah observed in the New Testament was the Passover. Never once do we find Easter. I know it's in the King James. Believe me, it's not in the Greek. It's not in the New Testament scriptures. It's simply missing from antiquity. So when did the church adopt the Easter celebration? Well, let's find out. I'm going to read another source here. This is from the New Unger's Bible Dictionary. Again, a very reputable source. It says the word Easter is of Saxon origin. It says Estra, the goddess of spring, in whose honor sacrifices were offered about Passover time each year. By the 8th century, Anglo-Saxons had adopted the name to designate the celebration of Christ's resurrection. So we see here when this transition occurred. It occurred in the 8th century, hundreds of years after Yahshua had come and gone. He was resurrected. Hundreds of years after this point did the church adopt Easter in its liturgy. And we see here that it adopted it from the Anglo-Saxons, from pagan worship. Or I want to read one more reference. This is from the Nelson's Illustrated Bible Dictionary. And here's what it says about Easter. It says Easter was originally a pagan festival honoring Oster, a Teutonic Germanic goddess of light and spring, at the time of the vernal equinox, a day in the spring when the sun crosses the equator and the day and night are of equal length. Sacrifices were offered in her honor. As early as the 8th century, the name was used to designate the annual Christian celebration of the resurrection of Messiah. So we see here, again, when this transition occurred, it was the 8th century. Again, it's just amazing to me. If you look at history, if you look at the Bible, what you come up with, and there's no denying the pagan origins of Easter. Again, this is not in the Bible. The Messiah and his apostles, they never observed this day, and even worse yet, according to all these references, and believe me, there's many, many more, confirming the origins of Easter. This came from the Anglo-Saxon pagan worship, and we find that it occurred somewhere around the 8th century. So very, very important. As a believer, and this is so important, so listen to this. This is so important. As a believer, it's critical that we worship our Father in heaven as He defines within His Word. Because when we don't, when we worship another way, Yahweh says he has no honor for that. He has no respect for that, because He wants us to worship as He defines within His Word, not as our church may say worship is, not as our pastor or our minister may say worship is. No, we need to ignore all of that and look at Scripture and how He defines worship. And what we find scripturally, again, is that they observed the Passover, the feast days, along with the Sabbath, and not this day called Easter, which took 800 years really for the church to adopt and bring into its liturgy. Well, I pray that this has been a blessing to you. I pray that you've learned something today. I pray that you understand how important it is to worship our Father in heaven in spirit and truth, as we find in the Word. When we worship Yahweh in paganism, listen, He has no regard for that. We know in Jeremiah 10, He says, learn not the way of the heathen. As believers, we're to take that to heart. We're not to learn paganism as we find through antiquity. We are to worship Yahweh as He defines within His Word. Well, I pray that this program has been a blessing, and I would encourage you to join me every drive-by teaching, because I think you're going to find truths that's really going to open your eyes to better and greater truths you may not know now. So I pray that this has been a blessing to you, and again, I'll see you next time on Drive-By Teaching. May Yahweh bless.
This has been Drive-By Teaching with Pastor Randy. Join the conversation and leave us a like and comment below. Subscribe now for all our latest releases. For one of the most extensive religious websites ever, yrm.org. For all the ways to connect with us, see the description below. From all of us here at Drive-By Teaching, don't get stuck in the slow lane of tradition. Put the brakes on ignorance and put your understanding into overdrive.